Microphone in front of me. A little bit better, eh? All right. I am Jordan Brandt. I'm going to take this off and actually let me know how the volume is. I'm going to turn the mic volume up a bit. As a matter of fact, about as high as it goes. So, if it's too loud, let me know. I'm still experimenting and figuring this all out. So, with that being said, again, welcome. Thank you for watching EVA Live. My name is Jordan Brandt. I am a hybrid electric vehicle expert with over 8 years experience. And I own own and manage two businesses I started myself, Voltec Hybrid and EV Repair, and EVA Electric Vehicles for All. So EVA is a nonprofit organization, and basically what we do is we reduce emissions and waste that are associated with producing hybrid and electric vehicles. And also, we're able to reduce overall emissions and waste from all transportation and from other systems that generate power. Let me check one more thing. I don't think you need to watch myself twice here on the background, and it does look like it's working. And if anybody hears anything weird or it's not working, let me know, because I'm running this whole show by myself currently. So, all right. What we are going to talk about tonight is, as the title to this video suggests, could used electric vehicles be the key, to mass adoption of hybrid and electric vehicles? So last night I was talking about this graph here. One sec. And this graph shows what these two different projections are. They're showing the increase in electric vehicles on the road. And so in these two graphs, they are only showing battery electric vehicles, BEVs, and PHEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And then they have different categories for those, for personal light-duty vehicles and light commercial vehicles, buses, and trucks. And what I have done here, and again, this is just shooting from the hip, just trying to give an idea. It's literally an illustration. I'm still working out what these exact numbers would look like. With these types of models, there is just a heck of a lot of things to keep in mind and calculate. So even if you have really good numbers now, it does not mean that this is going to be an accurate projection. But as you can see here, if we do what I am talking about doing, which is simply keeping the hybrid and electric vehicles we have on the roads for longer. So the ones that we already have, if we took better care of them, we could extend the life of them. And then also, if we had a fleet of those that we maintained and took care of all the service and repairs and whatever, if it gets into an accident, somebody hits it in a parking lot and messes up the door, we take care of all of that stuff. And so we're able to bring the costs down significantly by doing so, and then pass those cost savings on to the customers. And the idea is that we will build a fleet of these vehicles, and we will, sorry, I know that makes noise if I move that. Yes, we'll build a fleet of hybrid and electric vehicles. and make those available to people. If they want to buy one, they can do that. If they would like to lease to own, they could do that. But what I believe may be the best model, and I'm not alone in this, is a subscription model, which if you follow electric vehicle news, then you may have heard of a startup company called Canoo, based out of, I want to say LA, California, I believe, or West Coast. But so they're the first electric car manufacturer to offer a vehicle that it's only available under this monthly subscription. So you don't buy the vehicle, you don't lease the vehicle, you don't lease it to own, because just a typical lease basically is a extended rental or subscription, however you want to look at that. But typically when people are talking about a lease, they're talking about lease to own, and which we will have all of those options available. So whatever people want to do, they can do that. But I think for most people, what makes the most sense is they need access to a working and reliable vehicle. And a lot of people that are interested in maybe would consider driving a hybrid or electric vehicle. Well, if you go and you talk to people, okay, just normal people, at a gas station, for example, ask them about, hey, would you drive a hybrid, or, would you drive an electric vehicle, or, how high would gas prices have to be before you would consider driving an electric vehicle, or, any way to open the conversation, but to get to that question of, have they ever considered it? And actually most people have. I don't think I've met, well, maybe a few, but pretty much everybody I've asked that question, they've at least considered it. Now, the two responses that I get, and they go in this order, about 99% of the time, are, what about the battery? And who's going to fix it? And they say, I don't want to depend on only the dealership to get it fixed. A lot of the people I'm talking about are people that do not lease vehicles. They buy vehicles. They buy a used vehicle. Now, they may get that from a financing dealership, excuse me, and then that would be a lease. But a lot of people, basically take a gamble, right? When you buy a used car, you are rolling the dice. You don't know for sure what you're going to get, right? You could get something really good, or not. And even for vehicles that we know are very reliable, like, Gen 2 Toyota Prius, or any Prius for that matter, excluding Gen 1, because that was Gen 1, 2001 and 2003. But we know these cars are very reliable. I mean, you may have seen news stories about, million-mile Priuses, or 500,000 miles on the original engine, transmission, and hybrid battery. Now, that is not typical. It is indeed possible. And actually, it illustrates a part of what I'm talking about, which is that, well, why is it that some Priuses go 500,000 and others do not? They might not get even close to that, right? So these are probabilities that we're talking about here, like percentages when it may or may not fail. And so what I've seen in my practice working on these vehicles is usually we can expect about 90% of these batteries to make it to 200,000 miles. I'm talking for nickel metal hydride that are used in Toyota hybrids and several others. Now, why was I talking about that? Well, if we want to increase these percentages, if I back up a little bit, getting more vehicles on the road, there is another way to do that besides just making more new electric vehicles, which is basically the plan right now. And that is just to fix ones we already have. And that's where I was going, which was, why do you see some Toyota Priuses or others that can go to 500,000 miles and others do not? And the answer, well, there's a few answers. Number one, there's, like I said, it's a probability. Like I said, about 90% of these batteries will make it to 200,000. So, that means you could have a failure at 100,000, right? That means you could have a failure at 50,000, but it's just very, very unlikely. And at this point, we got a pretty good track record of those batteries' performance, right? So we have close to 20 years now. And so the reason why some don't go as far as others is because they were not properly maintained. Excluding the randomness statistical factor that I just mentioned. So excluding that, it's because they were not properly maintained. It means maybe they did not do the oil changes as were recommended. Maybe they did not do the transmission fluid flush that was recommended at 60,000, 100,000. So it's a combination of those things, and that if they're not done, that vehicle is statistically not going to last this long. So, and most of them do not. And so that's another benefit of having a fleet manage the vehicles. Because when you have a fleet, a fleet is like, it's not like, it is a risk pool. And a risk pool is what insurance companies use, right? They use a risk pool to spread out the risk, and that's how insurance works. The idea is that we all have something that's expensive, and we want protection in the unlikely event that something happens to it. So we all chip in a little bit into this pool, and we make this large pool. And when somebody in that group has a problem, it's covered. And there's plenty of money to cover it, even something that costs millions of dollars in the case of a auto accident. So it's the same concept here, except I'm not talking about liability here. I'm talking about the actual mechanical repairs and service of the vehicle. So and then there's other ways that we're able to bring the cost down as well. When you have a fleet, that means that, you typically, if you have a fleet, it's a select number or select models that you have. So it may be just one model, right? Maybe just a certain pickup truck, Chevy Silverados, for a government parks and recreation, or something like that. So that's the job of the fleet manager to decide which vehicles to put in the fleet. And it depends on what the needs are, right? So they may have 100 pickup trucks, and they may have 200 sedans, and they may have 50 vans, right? It really depends on what the needs are. And but in the case of EVA, we only focus on hybrid and electric vehicles, and from those we only focus on the ones that are the most practical to keep on the road and makes the most sense. So ones like a Gen 2 Toyota Prius, Gen 3 Prius, any of the Toyota hybrids, some of the Hondas, I guess, as well. But the point is, there's a lot out there that have been produced that are already here, and sadly, many of them are no longer with us, or will soon no longer be with us, because they are either sitting in a junkyard now, or they will be going to a junkyard. And you can kind of think of a junkyard like a death row for cars. And it's where they are waiting to finally be destroyed. And you see, the issue is that we need more of these vehicles, right? I mean, look, if you see this graph here, by the way, we're at, for all hybrid and electric vehicles, I think by 2019, it is about 3.5% or 4%. I think I was just looking at that last night. It was like almost 2% electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, and then and I think that's including plug-in hybrids, and then the other 2%, or it might be more than that now. I'm sure it's more than that now. Are hybrids. And what's interesting, if you read these reports, like I do, or at least I skim through them and find the information that is applicable to what I'm trying to find out, because these things can be very long and very detailed and very boring, perhaps like this video, but that'll change in the future. But if you see here, I mean, yeah, we're still at less than 5%. And yeah, if you read these different publications that they put out, you'll notice that at this point, they don't even bother counting a regular hybrid anymore. They only count battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. It depends on the report, because some of these could be from the Alternative Fuels Center database. So those types of reports are looking at all types of alternative energy and alternative fuels, and they look at other things as well. But if you're somebody that's in this industry and you read this news or publications, and you see these types of things, they tend to just omit hybrids at this point. Hybrids are, and I have, and I could pull it up, but articles and papers that have been written that basically say that strong hybrids like Toyota Prius are basically they don't make sense anymore, or they're arguing that they will go away, and what we will have is just battery electric vehicles and some plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or like range extended electric vehicles. And then for what they are saying, or what this particular article was saying, is that 48 volt mild hybrids, that would be enough. Automakers were just no longer going to offer full hybrids. They'll just have, in other words, it's like, you could think of it now that you could get a small, medium, and large size fry or milkshake or soda, whatever it is where you're at. And so now they're saying, you know what? Not too many people are really ordering the medium anymore, so we're just going to get rid of the medium and we're just going to have the small and the large. And they make a case for that, and but I disagree with it, and I'll tell you why. Well, a strong hybrid like a Toyota Prius, or a GM two-mode hybrid, or a Gen 1 or Gen 2 Ford Escape hybrid, it's possible to actually upgrade those and convert them into a plug-in hybrid. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because you can essentially create a new electric vehicle for very little. And when I say very little, I don't mean just money. I mean money, resources, so the different rare earth materials and whatever materials it uses, water, and then also energy. And the energy is carbon. So, if you can make an electric vehicle fast, by the way, quickly, right? It's possible for us to convert one of these in one day. So, if you're doing this at volume, you could conceivably be producing thousands of new electric vehicles a day. Now, there is a lot of details there, technical details, that, yes, it is not just that simple. You can't just put a lithium battery in the back of it and hook up some cables. It's not quite that simple. Now, that might work, or it might catch on fire. So we do things the right way, and but it takes some experimentation, right? But we know it's possible because the blue one in the picture there, mine, that I drive, I've done this to it. And there were several kits at one point that were available you could get to convert your full hybrid, strong hybrid, into a plug-in hybrid. And but those went away. Those companies went out of business. Once we started having the Nissan Leaf, Chevy Volts, right? Once the Chevy Volt was on the market, it was basically just, well, why would you do that? You might as well just get a Chevy Volt. And actually, if you ask people now, that is kind of the same response. If you read on some of the forums and stuff, it's, what you're talking about doing, you might as well just get a Chevy Volt because, yeah, you can get Chevy Volts for pretty cheap right now. And but there's a part that everybody missed with all of that, and that is the manufacturing carbon footprint to make a whole new electric vehicle versus the footprint to convert an existing one. So the existing one, most of everything is already there. And keep in mind, at this point, this vehicle has already paid off its carbon debt. And I talked about that in some of the other videos. But, it takes a certain amount of time for any type of renewable energy or application to pay back the debt that it owes from its creation to be made. It takes carbon and materials to make anything, not just electric vehicles, right? So all cars. And vehicles specifically are very carbon intensive things to manufacture because it's not just like a little, piece of plastic toy or something. That's not, this is stuff that is literally people's lives depend on it, and it is expected to perform without failure for over a decade. And one of the harshest environments you can imagine, there is much worse environments, but you get what I'm saying. A lot of vibration, heat, water, right, humidity, salt, physical trauma. It's a harsh environment, and so these components need to be top quality, right? And they have to be able to last, which means they are not cheap. They're not cheap to make, and of course it requires more materials and more energy to produce something like that. So it's important then that when people talk about making new ones, you do have to keep in mind, when you make a new electric vehicle, you are releasing a significant amount of carbon, and you're using a significant amount of resources. Now, if you use that electric vehicle, it will pay that back, and it will pay it back many times over. And it'll pay it back faster if you charge it using a renewable energy source. That's kind of the whole idea. And but even if you don't, it's actually still cleaner, as other articles and videos have talked about. But it does. You do have to release some to build it, and climate scientists are in agreement that we have less than 10 years to drastically cut our emissions, which means that what we do in the next 10 years is critically important, right? This is a time-sensitive thing. So if you build, let's say, a solar farm, okay, a large solar panel array, And it's, move this a little bit. Let's just say, in this case, it has all the battery system incorporated, right? The whole power management system, everything is there. And so then we're going to say, okay, how much carbon did it take to build this system? All the panels, all the wiring, the batteries, like I said, the power electronics, the housings, all the labor, all the welders that came out there to install it, all of that, right? The semi trucks, which burn diesel, that they loaded this stuff onto to get it there, the construction equipment they used, which is still diesel, but we're working to change that. But you add all that up, right? And you say, okay, here's what it is. It's 100 tons of CO2, or in the case of this, it would be much more than just 100 tons. And keep in mind too, right now I'm just talking about the carbon, and there's other resources used as well, like water, and obviously the rare earth materials. Now, those are recyclable, and so we can recycle that stuff. But there is a finite amount of it, and there is plenty of it. There's studies that show, last I heard, it was like, current projections said we had 3 times what they think we would need to get to 100% electric, because they accounted for things like, well, by 2050, we're going to have better battery technology by then, and it's not going to take as much lithium, because that is indeed the trend. If you look at the percentage of lithium content in the earlier lithium batteries to what they're doing now, I guess I'll have to read up on that, because this stuff changes every day. So it's probably changed since the last time I looked at it. But yeah, so it takes resources to build that. So if we have less than 10 years to reduce the amount that we release, well, even if it's something that is going to end up saving carbon, right? The key questions to ask are, how much does it release? And how long does it take to get to neutral and then to negative? So, and the example about this solar farm, if it took 10 years before it had paid back its debt, right, you could say that that's futile, right? That it'll be too late then. They say we have less than 10 years to drastically cut our emissions, or else we will hit these irreversible tipping points. So that's why I'm saying that, right? It's not that building. It's not that I'm against building solar farms. I'm actually all for it, and I'm just saying that alone will not be enough. And even if we stopped all emissions today, we're still going to have extended effects from this, right? So it's been over 100 years in the making. So even if you stop it today, you could maybe just assume it's going to take about 100 years to fizzle out. I mean, if it was just a linear relationship like that, which it's not. But yeah, it's I'm supposed to go to rant. There's another camera over here for rants, and that's what it's supposed to be for, is for these rants. But yeah, so people say, don't bother converting your hybrid because you can just buy a Chevy Volt. That may be true if you can buy a Chevy Volt. If you're like most Americans, you cannot. And even you can get Chevy Volts now for, I don't know, $7,000 maybe from an auction, which is incredible, right? Because when that car was new and when we were, reading about it before it came out and saw its prototype, right, the concept car, we're all really excited. And yeah, I loved that car. And yeah, it is a great car. Now, most Americans still can't afford that. most Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. So even if it's a $5,000 car, well, yeah, they can't afford that. Now, where do people go when they can't afford a car? Well, you might say, well, go to the dealership and do a lease. And as it turns out, 80% of battery electric vehicles are leased, not bought. And I'll skip the excessive depreciation part of it. I've gone over that a few times. But not everybody qualifies for a lease. It's just that simple. You have to have good credit. And if you don't, then you good or excellent credit, right? And especially if you're talking about one of these lease deals that you saw in an advertisement. Now it says right in there, like, based on excellent credit, right? So what you'll actually pay is probably going to be more than that. So yeah, you need good or excellent credit. You need a cosigner. You need usually some type of down payment. And this is the one that really trips people up and stops people from being able to lease a hybrid or electric vehicle. I'm speaking about full coverage insurance. So that's a requirement to lease a new electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle or any new vehicle for that matter, because it's expensive. It's brand new, and electric vehicles and hybrids tend to cost more than traditional internal combustion engine vehicles do. So you have all of that stacked against somebody that if they had even considered getting or driving, owning, leasing, whatever, if they had even considered that, leasing or buying a hybrid or electric vehicle, they would find out pretty quickly that they're not eligible. And most people would probably just know that they're not eligible because of that basic stuff I just said. And which means that there's a lot of people being left out of this electric revolution. And when you read articles, which I have some pulled up here, but about what is holding back Americans from switching to electric, well, like I said, just go talk to some people at a gas station, and by far the first two things I get reasons why they are not ready to do that or will not do that is number one, what about the battery? It's not going to last forever, right? I mean, it's like people are thinking of their cell phone, right? Which actually is not too far off, but very different, but very much the same. So yeah, they know that batteries don't last forever. Well, neither do traditional vehicles, but okay. At least with a traditional car, if you've grown up with those, you have a good idea what to expect. And even if it may be crappy, but at least they know, right? You're asking somebody to step into this unfamiliar territory. Here's another fun fact for you. Most Americans, the most valuable possession that they own is their vehicle. And here's another one. 75% of Americans rely on a vehicle to get to work, not a bus or a train or public transportation, but a private vehicle, whether it's theirs or a friend's, right? They carpool. But 75% of Americans still rely on a personal vehicle, which that was higher than I thought. I just read that a few weeks ago, but that was higher than I thought. And where I'm at here in Metro Detroit area of Michigan, we don't have public transportation. I mean, it's just that simple. Not where I'm at, and I'm only 45 minutes from Detroit. I'm right next to Pontiac, and there is buses in Pontiac, but once you get out to where I'm at, there's not. And even the ones that are in Pontiac, yeah, you can get to Detroit or to some other places on it, but wow, that is I don't know if you guys have ever commuted on public transportation before. I lived in LA for a while, and yeah, that is tough, man. Especially if you grew up used to having a vehicle. That's when you really realize, wow, I had it good with a car. Now, there are some upsides when you're sitting on a bus looking at everybody else pissed off in traffic, and you're playing on your phone. So I guess there's that. But then I won't talk about smells. But that's the reality, is that, especially in places out here by me, you just, public transportation is not an option. And then what do you do then? Well, you may say, well, ride an electric bike, which I love e-bikes. E-bikes are awesome, but we have winter. Can't do that. And even if we, didn't have winter, or you said I can deal with that, well, there is no bike paths where I'm at either. It's like we're so far behind when it comes to sustainability type stuff here in Michigan. It's embarrassing, actually. Here we are, the Motor City, right? Which we still, as it stands, in dollars, okay, there is the most money spent in research and development in dollars anywhere in the world is here in the Motor City for hybrid and electric vehicles. Now, that's changing, and it's China that's closing in quickly on that. Now, they've long since surpassed us with manufacturing. I'm just talking about the research and development side of it. Of course, they're trying to make it so that they don't need us for that anymore, which I can't really say I blame them. It's not like we wouldn't do the same, right? Getting back to my point, which was that it's, for a lot of people, you have to consider different parts of the country, because where you live, a Nissan Leaf, Gen 1 Nissan Leaf with, let's just be honest, a 40 to 50 mile range left at this point, that may be fine for a lot of people, actually. That might be fine. Maybe they only drive like 15, 20 miles to work one way. They can opportunity charge while they're there. I mean, there's a lot of people that could drive a electric vehicle with a 50-mile range and do just fine. But what about those times when they do need to go further, right? And then does it make sense for somebody to buy, if we're talking about a 2011 Nissan Leaf, does it make sense in 2019 going on 2020 to buy a nearly decade-old electric vehicle? Well, does it make sense to buy a 10-year-old smartphone? No. Maybe. I mean, because they at least built them tougher then. But it wouldn't work with the software anyways, right? They don't let you do that. So it doesn't make sense, because smartphones technology has been advancing so fast that the best one now in 2019 or 2020, 3 years from now, will not be the best one. It will be third place at best, right? So the same is true for electric vehicles, because this is a relatively new technology. And yes, there were electric vehicles back at the turn of the 1900s. I guess, what is that, the 20th century, right? Okay, because we're in the 21st century. Okay, all right. Excluding those, though, I'm going to start with 2001. Okay, let's just start with 2001, because that's when the Gen 1 Toyota Prius came out, and that to the rest of the world. And that's when the Honda Insight came out as well. Was that 03? That was 2003, right? Anyways, but that's where I'm going to start. It's 2001. It hasn't even been 20 years yet. And keep in mind, the other auto industries had over 100 years. So pretty much every nook and cranny for the existing auto industry has been filled, right? Figured out. Somebody came along, said, hey, we can recycle the tires, or we could do this. We can rebuild starters and alternators, right? So people have figured out all that stuff. Companies, right? And all the smaller companies have kind of went away, right? That's a general trend that happens in any type of new technology or business, and that is at the beginning of it, you have tons of people, right? All kinds of startups, entrepreneurs that are trying to get their foot in the store. And then eventually, though, people start dropping out. And as time goes on, then the market share goes to a smaller percentage of companies, which kind of just further ensures whichever ones were struggling, it just really further ensures that they'll fail. And then you're left with a couple large players, right? Which is what we had up until recently. We have an explosion of electric car companies now. And there was not, before electric cars and hybrid cars, you didn't have a lot of people trying to start car companies because of what I just said. It was like, well, how could you possibly do anything better or cheaper than, or even get a foothold? And this other, they've already locked you out, right? Now, my analogy is that when there is either a new industry, new technology that enables some new industry, or when there is a disruptive change to an existing industry, and in this case, the transportation industry, it's like the doors are open, the floodgates are open, and it's everybody's rushing in as quickly as they can, right? And it's like everybody just goes into there until it's full, and like you can't even close the doors almost. But that's what they do. Once everybody gets in there, it's so crowded that some people start getting pushed out. All right, too many people rushed in. There's too many people. Some people are annoying. Some people are not smart, and so they get kicked out. And then the people that are left, they say, all right, let's close these doors and let's put a lock on it and let's put a chains around it, and let's ensure that nobody can get into here. And then again, when a new disruption happens, it's like, my analogy for that is that there's like a new door that opens up on the side over here to like a new hallway, and people just start rushing into there as quickly as possible. And these people that had this one all chained up and stuff, they kind of have to take off some of the chains and try to get over into that one now too, and get a foothold in that one, and do the same thing. And why I'm saying all that is because we're in this beginning phase of that, where you have all these people rushing in, right? We have just I don't even know how many different electric car manufacturers there are at this point, and how many proposed ones there are, prototypes, startup companies. There are a lot, which is great. I support that, and we need those vehicles. So it's an interesting time to be in and be a part of. And all Eva and myself I'm trying to do is help us navigate through this a little bit better, maybe, and maybe ensure that we get to our goals faster, or actually just get to our goals at all, and that that we can help people with this. The benefits of this technology should be distributed more fairly, and it should be open to people, everybody. And right now, it's not currently, and so we are opening this up to everybody. Thus, the name Electric Vehicles for All. And it's really. I know I make things very, very simple. So let me see. I'm going to go through this again. EVA's a nonprofit. What we do is we refurbish hybrid and electric vehicles and build a fleet. We have a fleet of them, and we make those available to people. And so we've gone through these vehicles. We've rebuilt things, tested everything on it. and replace certain things with used parts when we can. Put that back up. Replace certain parts with used components when that's possible. Or if not, it doesn't make sense to use used gaskets, for example. So some of it has to be new, but okay, I'm already going long. So we make those vehicles available to people to buy, lease, or subscribe, a monthly subscription where you have some type of deposit or something that you have to co-sign or some way, right? And then there's different programs for different vehicles at different price options. So what you're going to hear me usually talking about is what is the cheapest option, and that is for something like a Gen 2 Toyota Prius, where you could pay $200 a month, and anything above a certain mileage would add 7 cents per mile, or whatever it is for that vehicle. So then people would know, okay, I have a set amount to pay every month, and there's no surprises. They don't have a $2,000 surprise repair bill. And we, being EVA, working with Voltec, see, since we manage the fleet, and since Voltec has spent the last several years perfecting how to keep these vehicles on the road for the lowest cost possible, while also getting the best performance possible, getting it back to, or keeping it where it should be, right? So it's not just about doing it as cheaply as possible, but the whole point of these hybrids and electrics was to get good efficiency, right? And specifically for a hybrid, good MPGs. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to put all the work into something if you're not going to keep it working at that optimum level that it should be. So as the fleet, we take care of everything, right? If something needs to be fixed, we fix it. As a hybrid electric vehicle mechanic, I could tell you that, it's not that people don't want to take care of their cars. It's that they can't afford to, usually. And a lot of times, if your only option is to go to a dealership or some other place, you're going to be paying a lot of money to have one of these cars worked on. But it does not have to be that way. I'm here to tell you that it's not the boogeyman, right? It's not anything that much more complicated. I know that's stupid because it's absolutely more complicated, but people make it seem like, especially with hybrids, and that's what you'll read in some of these different articles and things, is that, well, hybrids, they just don't make much sense because you might as well just go pure electric because it has lower service costs. Like, it doesn't need oil changes and spark plugs and things like that. Well, you see what they've based all those numbers off of. That's called the total cost of ownership for the vehicle for its lifetime, which typically is 15 years, 160,000 miles. So they say the total cost to own this car, it's based on the miles per gallon or fuel economy, or if it's electric, no fuel. But still, it's the initial cost of the vehicle, and then how much it costs to service that vehicle. So it costs more to have your Mercedes-Benz worked on, right, than your Toyota. So they take all of that into consideration, and then they generate, and you can look at these, and if I took more time or had more time, I would have it pulled up here, but I'm not doing that tonight. But you can look at these total cost of ownerships, and the takeaway from those, I probably should try to pull it up, because they compare the cost of battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, regular hybrids, and conventional vehicles. And a conventional vehicle that's in the same price range, and it's we're all comparing sedans in this example, probably, right? So, but you see the data that they used for servicing the hybrid vehicles, for all the vehicles, most likely was from the dealership. Although I can't say for sure for the internal combustion engine if that was based off dealership prices or not. I don't know. But I know for sure that they're basing the other prices for servicing the hybrid and electric vehicle from the dealership. And those prices are skewed. And what I mean by that is that they're a lot higher than they really are, or it really costs. If you have a shop like Voltec do the work. So, our price is a fraction of what the dealership price is. And a lot of times that's possible because we use used parts, right? Refurbished parts, which is, taking a used part that was good and just cleaning it up, testing it, making sure that it's good, maybe lubricating it or something, right? If it was a ball joint or something like that, that would be refurbishing it, right? So with the refurbished vehicle, and these prices that they're giving for the total cost of ownership, it's skewed. It's a lot higher because they're basing, for the hybrid, I'm saying, because they're basing all of that service, the spark plug changes and all that was all being done at a dealership. And the electric vehicle doesn't have all of that service. Now, it does have some service, and it may require repairs, and it may have expensive repairs. And it may get into an accident, right? Even if it doesn't ever break down, well, somebody can smack into you. And at that point, if it's out of warranty, well, where do you go to get your electric vehicle fixed, right? You're probably, like most people, will probably go to the dealership, where they're going to find out real quick that they're not going to have their electric vehicle fixed. They're going to trade it in, get whatever they can for it, and get something else. That may be the last hybrid or electric vehicle that person owns for a while, right? They may say, that just didn't work out like what I thought it would, like what people say it does, right? Because it can. You can absolutely save a lot of money, and you can save a lot of carbon from going into the atmosphere driving a hybrid or an electric vehicle. But when you talk about used ones, when you talk about getting out of warranty and high mileage, right, and accidents and rebuilding these, it gets expensive. So, but the reason why I'm talking about these reports, okay, is because their conclusions that they make say that, from our numbers that we've done here, it just doesn't make sense to make hybrids anymore. You might as well just do battery electrics and regular cars with some maybe 48 volt, BAS system or something. So if you have flawed data, right, and I'm not intentionally, that's just what was available, right, to them, the researchers. So, but if you have flawed data, well, whatever conclusions you come to based on that data are also flawed. So I am saying that the total cost of ownership for these hybrids is significantly lower than what you'll read in any type of report like that because of what I just laid out. Now, they do also, they did specify in those reports that, and they gave examples as well. It is a good report, but they did give examples of, well, this can vary a lot depending on what vehicle you're talking about, right? Like which model, what make and model, hybrid or electric vehicle, because some of them are just not very good, right? Some of them maybe had some issues, and they're just not on the road anymore. Maybe the company doesn't exist anymore, which there is quite a few of those, and there is guaranteed going to be a lot more on this road to electrification. That's just part of it, right? I mean, and again, Am I saying we shouldn't? We should stifle innovation? No, I encourage people to design and build new electric vehicles. All I'm asking is that policymakers and government officials and other people that have a say and influence in this industry consider what I'm proposing, and that is, let's just take better care of ones we already have. How long can you keep a Prius like this on the road? Well, maybe as long as you want. I mean, at some point, it's how many times it's like a Frankenstein, right? I mean, what's original on it at some point? Everything has been changed, right? Which may frighten some people, and it may excite some other people if you're like me. But yeah, I mean, the answer is that you could probably go about as long as you want until the thing finally gets smashed in an accident or something, right? Or it's just filled with so much dog hair that's no longer acceptable. Even a HEPA filter can't solve that one. But so if you look at these graphs where they're saying, here's, they'll show ones where here's where we're going. Here's where we're proposing we should go. That's what the new policy scenario is, the one on the left. That's left for you guys, right? Yeah, okay. And then their EV30 scenario, interesting too, right? EV. But they're showing that, and it just the general takeaway, the numbers aren't important, right? Here's where we're at. Here's where we want to go. Here's where we need to go, right? So all the net result of doing what I'm talking about doing is that we would have more of these vehicles on the roads. Because think about it this way. If you're in a boat and it's taken on a considerable amount of water, right? It's sinking. Let's just say it has a lot of water in it, though, okay, at this point. And you're bailing it out with a bucket, and you're going as fast as you can, and you're telling some onlookers, hey, man, I need help. I need a bigger bucket. I need to go faster. Maybe you guys can help. Grab a bucket or anything and start bailing some water, right? And then one of those people is like, hey, man, maybe you should plug the holes in the bottom of the boat. And he's like, there's a bunch of holes in the bottom of your boat. That's why you have to keep bailing water. Maybe if you plug the holes, at least slowed them down, right? Not stopped it completely, but slowed it down. You wouldn't have to bail water like a madman. Maybe you don't need a larger bucket. Maybe you don't need to go faster. That's what I'm saying here, is that, and actually I'm saying we shouldn't do less. We can do more with less resources, right? So if you reduce waste and increase efficiency, then you kind of have two options. You could say, well, we could get to wherever it is that we were trying to go using less than we would have before, or we can go past wherever we were trying to get before using the same amount that we did before. And so I'm saying the latter. Let's get further using the same amount. That's just the general idea. And then it goes past that. So when it's no longer practical to keep one of these vehicles on the road, I don't use the language possible. Practical, because not all of them are worth keeping on the road. So we have to draw a line somewhere as to what do we keep and what do we not keep. That was my discussion about triage last night. And my recommendation as a expert in this field is that we practice a bit of triage and just ensure that we are doing the best job possible. That was my attempted, square radio announcer voice. But, that's Yeah, that's the idea. Just yeah, reduce waste, increase efficiency. You can get more done with the same amount, or you can get the same amount done with less. And yeah, and so triage is saying, well, what are we going? We have a set amount of resources, right? Which we do, and you also have to keep in mind, even if we have 3 times as much lithium as it would take to electrify all of the vehicles in the world, well, you still, it takes a certain amount of time to pull that out of the ground and refine it, right? Do all of that. So, yeah, there is a finite limit per year, right? A set number of metric tons of lithium salt that they mine, and that is what it is. So, we should be asking though, and keeping in mind, like I said, the 10 years thing with the climate. Okay, we have less than 10 years to drastically reduce carbon. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to be building things that that don't become carbon neutral or carbon negative until later on. Now, even though they may have big paybacks, it's the most important thing would be to focus on what we can do right now in the present and in the near term and in the 10 years that I'm talking about. What can we do to have the largest impact on reducing emissions? And, vehicles, transportation is just part of it. And this channel is about sustainability, but this show specifically is usually going to be talking about electric and hybrid vehicles and renewable energy and reusing this stuff as I'm talking about. So why was I talking about that in the first place? Well, so when it's no longer practical to keep one of these vehicles on the road, there is still a lot of other things that are useful from there. And you may be saying, yeah, second life batteries, Jordan, right? And to which I say, yes. That's a good start. Go on. Okay. Motors? Yes, okay. Next. The motor controller, the inverters. Yep, check. Next. Well, that's usually where, if you read about second life for hybrid and electric vehicles, that's about as far as it goes. And about 90% of it stops at the first one, at the big B, the battery, right? And because that's the most obvious thing. But that's not the only component in a hybrid or an electric vehicle that is uses rare earth materials and is also something you would only find in a hybrid or an electric vehicle, not in a regular vehicle. And these components I'm talking about specifically, so the power electronics from the motor controller, so you can reuse and repurpose all this stuff. You can actually take apart that motor controller and take out the individual IGBTs. It may not be very practical, but it depends. But you can pull out those individual components, or you could try to use the whole component as it was built, but find a different purpose for it, right? So that inverter converter assembly could actually, if you knew how to properly control it and you had the proper systems to control it, and you wrote the code in the software, or could somehow read and change what was in there, you could make it do basically whatever you want, right? Like whatever is within reason. So this is something that, at its most basic level, it takes in electricity and it puts it out, right? And it can change the voltage, and it could change, well, I guess it can't really change current, but it changes voltage, puts it into the form it needs to be if it's going to the motor generator, or if it's coming from the motor generator going to the battery. So that's all it is. That's all it's doing, though, right? It's just changing voltages. It's pulsing them in a specific way to make the motor spin. It's actually very complicated when you if you want to go into detail about it. But then if you want to be simple and have a bird's eye view, it's very simple. And electric vehicles are very simple, right? But incredibly complex at the same time. And that's part of the funny thing when people that don't work on these vehicles say, oh, well, they don't break, they don't require service. Well, that's just not true. They do. Things do break. These are newer models, so there's going to be some bugs to work out. And then there's accidents. So if you're out of warranty and you have a $50,000 electric vehicle, well, I'm assuming if you can afford a $50,000 electric vehicle, you probably have that full coverage insurance that I was referring to earlier. But if you live in Michigan, where I'm at, we have the highest auto insurance rates in the country. So most people, myself included, we roll the dice and we get the bare bones liability only policy. Now, I just so happen to own a repair shop that works on hybrid vehicles. So if somebody smashes my Prius, I'll be upset, but I'll move on and I'll have another one, or I'll fix that one. So, and if I can't fix that one, then I'll take all the parts out of it and get a different one and use it to fix that one. That's kind of the idea, right? I was talking about it last night. It's like organ donors. It's very similar, which if you're not an organ donor, I would recommend being one. I am one myself. And, death is something that happens to all of us, and it may happen later in life or early. And the only positive that I could take out of that, well, not the only, but is that if you're an organ donor, you can save other people's lives. And that means something to me, right? And I can't take it with me. I mean, I'm dead. So I'll be wherever I am when that happens. So, but it's the same thing here. If one of these cars, let's just, it gets hit hard, just like a person, you can't fix it. It's too bad. But it may be able to fix 10 other Priuses that were in a more minor accident or had a mechanical failure, right? Because that one that got hit, it wasn't taken off the road because it broke down. It was running fine, but it got smashed, right? So there's a lot of good stuff there still. And where it gets real interesting, though, is these components specifically, they are, you can use them in carbon negative applications. So you could take a motor generator, let's say you have 48 volt BAS, and you could make one heck of a wind turbine from that, right? And if you guys have ever looked into building your own solar system or wind power system, right? Just buying the components and putting things together, hooking it up yourself. I mean, you found out pretty quick, I'm sure, that it's not cheap. And you got to spend a good amount of money, and you have to break down the costs, like what I was saying, of how much is this going to save me? I mean, the first thing you have to look at is, well, what's your energy usage per day? How much does it cost, right? And then you could say, well, if I spend $100 a month on electricity, then, I would want the system that could cover that. And if it costs $1,000 to do this, then it would take 10 months to pay itself off. That's pretty good. So, yeah, but a lot of people can't afford that. Going back to what I said before, 50% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. So they can't do that. And people that would consider doing that can't afford it. So just like for electric vehicles, right? If we want to increase mass adoption, you got to bring the price down. You got to make them available to people. Now, just relying on car makers and some scientists to come up with a new battery chemistry or something that's going to just make it so cheap that you can make an electric vehicle with like a 400-mile range for, $10,000 or something, then, well, that would be a game changer. But we're not anywhere close to that. Which just means that for the vast majority of Americans, they're not going to be able to drive one of these vehicles for a while. And nor will they be interested because, excuse me, because of what I talked about, right? I mean, what about the battery? And then who's going to fix it out of warranty, right? Am I only locked into the dealership? Is it like one of these devices, right? Where your options are limited, right? There's another one that comes to mind. It starts with a T. But so people aren't the masses, right? Because if you're watching this, you're probably like me, and you probably already made up your mind, but maybe not. And if you haven't, then congratulations for actually watching something that maybe challenges what you've heard from other people. And I want to encourage people like that to watch this show, because I'm not trying to shame people or push people away. All I'm trying to show is, hey, this can be a good thing for our country. Whether or not you even believe in climate change, it actually doesn't matter. Which I do believe in climate change, but even if you don't, okay, fine. Well, you like good paying jobs, right? I mean, do you like saving money? What about bringing up the standard of living for all of your fellow Americans? Improving air quality? I guess we said they don't care about climate change, but most people care about money, right? And most Americans would say they care about jobs for Americans, good jobs. So if you care about those things, then support electric vehicles, because guess what? They create those. They save money and they generate jobs. Now that'd be a tangent, Cam. They also take away some jobs, but that's what people are claiming with some of these strikes with the GM workers. And yes, it's true though, right? This is a disruptive technology, and this is, again, something that EVA is asking policymakers and people to keep in mind. So when you have a disruptive technology, yes, you're going to displace things, companies, people. Some people will lose their job, right? And, like coal mining is just going away. I mean, we shouldn't be trying to keep that. But you should have a plan in place to take care of those people, right? That through no fault of their own will lose. In a lot of cases, the only thing they know how to do professionally, and or have a long resume or experience with, right? So if you're taking that away from them, even if you're helping the planet, I think you have to include humans in there, right? I mean, some people might be a really hardcore environmentalist. I don't think that's very pragmatic. Not that I am a pragmatist by any means. Quite the opposite. But, like, you don't want to scare people away. And I'm really good at talking to normal people about climate change and changing people's minds about it, because what you don't want to do is be confrontational or demeaning to people, right? It's okay that people have different points of view, even if it goes against the vast majority of scientists. That falls onto us then to be able to change these people's minds. And you don't change people's minds by, wagging your finger at them or shaming them or, any of those different things, or being demeaning, right? Calling them stupid. That none of that's going to work. And people might say, well, who cares, right? Who cares about those people? Well, if you don't, somebody else will. And that somebody else may not be very nice. So it's better that, and also, again, look, people that oppose electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, they oppose it because they're usually, and not all, no, not all of them, but usually I would say it's because they've heard so much misinformation, or it's all they've heard is misinformation about it, right? So, and actually, all people, like I said, just normal people, not people that aren't against them, or they're not like against global warming science, but they're just not going to drive one, right? They're just not going to do it. But yeah, if you ask them, it's not as much on their minds. But what I'm trying to do is have a discussion, and that's really the best way I could look at it, is just say, all right, well, if let's put the climate thing aside for now. And I talked last night about, by the way, if you have somebody that's on the fence or totally against the idea of man-made climate change, just talk about ocean acidification, because there's no getting around that one. That there's no question on that. It's straightforward, basic chemistry and biology. It's just that simple. If you've drank a carbonated beverage before, then you can understand ocean acidification, I guess. But yeah, so if you really want to throw a wrench into somebody's gears, if that's going off about how global warming's fake, throw in ocean acidification, because I can almost guarantee you that they've never heard of it. And I can almost guarantee probably 80% of Americans haven't heard of ocean acidification, which is super important. So, and it's a direct result of not just man-made carbon emissions, right? There's natural carbon emissions as well. But what we're doing is accelerating it at a massive, massive scale. And that's what I was trying to talk about last night some. It's just how most people just can't wrap their heads around the fact that, well, you can't wrap your head around how big the planet is, right? But so then, though, people telling you that us itty-bitty little people actually can change this huge thing and change it drastically. And that just seems not possible to people. Well, here's a few things that I use to explain to these people, put things into perspective, okay? The atmosphere looks really big to us. You look up at the sky, you could see a jet up there miles and miles up in the sky. So you just think, wow, the sky is enormous. There is no way that and the planet is huge. So there's no way that me driving a car is going to change that. And again, numbers can be misleading, deceiving, however you want to present it. So they'll say, well, the biggest greenhouse gas by far is water vapor, which is true. It is. Carbon dioxide, I think, is what is it, like 0.8% of that total atmosphere. It might be even less than that. That might be, I can't remember if that's methane and all greenhouse gases. It's like less than 1% though. Yeah, it's obviously all a scam invented in China, because you're talking about less than 1% of the total gases in the atmosphere, and you're saying that is going to cause irreversible tipping points to happen. Well, yeah. So, like I said, let me put a few things into perspective, right? So, things that most humans would have some experience with, okay? I haven't been to space. Have you? Probably not, right? Unless you've been to space, you probably can't really appreciate how big this planet is. So, although I am going to go there eventually. It's a goal, personal life goal. And that made me lose my track of thought. And I want to throw these jokes in there, but then it's not even really jokes. It's just a smart ass comment. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Ocean acidification and climate change and putting things into perspective. So the atmosphere, okay? If we're going to put things into scale, all right? If you take an apple, a regular apple, the kind you eat, not the kind sitting in front of me, which drive me insane. But anyways, the kind you eat, the skin on it, right? Have you ever peeled the skin of an apple off, right? I mean, it's very, very thin. It's about as thin as a piece of paper. And so, if you wanted to put things into scale, the thickness of the skin on an apple, that's about the same thickness as the atmosphere on the Earth. And you may be thinking, like, that can't be right. It's big. Yes, and that's my point. That's how big it is that proportionally, this, less than 1% of it is the entire biosphere. Everything that we know, the biosphere is everything from, way up, I forget how many feet, right? However high the highest bird flies off the highest mountain, down to the deepest part of the oceans, and then down into the soil some. But it's where life exists on Earth. That's the biosphere. And it's a thin film on the surface of the Earth. You could think of it like a biofilm, if you know what a biofilm is. Also, plaque, right, on your teeth. That's a biofilm. So, yes, we are essentially if you had an apple that you left out for a while, or maybe an orange. Orange is a better example when it molds, right? It just gets mold all over it. You can kind of think of all life on Earth like that, right? Occupying about that same amount of space. So then when you start thinking about it that way, right, then that atmosphere is not so big. And then time. Time is the key factor in all of this climate change stuff if we're talking about reducing emissions. Or anything to do with it. It's time. Hold that thought. Time for a drink. Some H2O. Terrific. All right. So time is the key factor. What is oil? What is petroleum? Well, fossil fuels, people say. I don't use that term anymore. That's why I say petro. I am joining preemptively with the rest of the world. Or maybe, I don't know if that's just Europe. No, it's like the rest of the world, right? You guys call it petroleum. So, just like I try to use metric, but, if I always talked in metric, no, most people wouldn't know what I'm talking about, because here in America we don't use metric. So, but time and oil. Okay. Question: how long does it take to produce a gallon of oil? Roughly speaking, hundreds of millions of years. Okay. Now, that's actually not really the right way to put it. I don't know exactly what the right way to put it would be, meaning how much does it take to make a gallon, or how long does it take? It's kind of, I don't know. But the point is, okay, it took literally hundreds of millions of years of mostly saltwater, seawater, algae, okay? That's why people call it fossil fuels. It's like, no, it's not from dinosaurs. Like, less than 1/10 of 1% of it is dinosaur. Probably even that is too much. But most of it came from algae. Most of it came from saltwater algae in places like Saudi Arabia that used to be ocean there, right? Saudi Arabia used to be an ocean. And that's what was left behind, was you had hundreds of millions of years, okay, of algae that were growing, taking sunlight, right, photons from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and actually, they're not taking carbon dioxide from the air, they're taking it from the water because they're in water, and the CO2 gets absorbed into the oceans and where it changes into carbonic acid. So that's how they get their carbon, I think. I'm pretty sure on that. Whereas trees, they actually pull it from the air. I'm pretty sure algae pull it from the water. I'm pretty sure. But they release oxygen gas too, just like trees, and which of course bubbles up. So, so they think about that though. They're taking sunlight, solar energy, right? They're taking solar energy and using these chemical reactions basically to make a petrochemical, hydrocarbon, right? So, and to get that gallon or gallons or oil field, right? I mean, like the reserves that are in Saudi Arabia that is hundreds of millions of years, if not a billion years. Okay, maybe not a billion, but hundreds of millions of years. And so if it takes hundreds of millions of years to make a gallon of oil, okay, so that was hundreds of millions of years of pulling CO2 from the air, okay? Following me? How long does it take to burn a gallon of oil? Well, it depends on how big of a pyro you are, I guess. Either way, really, really fast compared to how long it took to make it. I mean, you can burn a gallon of oil in minutes, right? In minutes. And it took hundreds of millions of years for algae to sequester that carbon that was in the atmosphere back then, by the way, right? And Earth's atmosphere has always been changing, dude. Yeah, it indeed was different then. It was unbreathable. You would not live in that atmosphere back then. So, yes, Earth's atmosphere has changed, will continue to change. But we are in this Goldilocks zone. That's actually what it's called, literally, where we're at from the sun, a certain distance. Too close, it's too hot. Too far away, too cold. So just like Goldilocks, you got to be right in the right area to have liquid water. Now, to maintain liquid water, you got to have just the right temperatures. Now, just being the right distance from the sun, that's not enough. You need other things. There's other factors as well. We have a spinning magnetic core that produces, that protects us from the solar wind and all these ionized particles coming from the sun, which would make life impossible. Life never would have been able to exist because of how much radiation there would be. DNA just literally just falls apart, right? So there's so many things that make life possible on this planet, and it is this delicate balancing act of everything being just kind of just perfect. And it's stabilized too, right? Because it goes through cycles. The sun goes through cycles, solar cycles, and these things interact with each other. We're talking about very, very complicated systems, and then trying to boil this stuff down into simple little graphs like these, right? So that normal people can understand it. So it's no wonder that most people can't or don't want to believe it, because it seems hard to believe. But when you start explaining it like how I am, maybe it makes more sense, right? I mean, again, I just maybe shrunk your world quite a bit with my explanation of the thickness of the atmosphere. I hope my community college professor, whoever it was that told me that, was correct. I should probably fact check that. Perhaps it's an orange, but I'm pretty sure they said apple. But it's you put that into perspective though, right? That with what I just said, which is it took hundreds of millions of years to make that gallon of oil, and you burnt it like that. And you didn't just burn one, but you burned hundreds or thousands or millions of gallons. per person, right? So take that times almost 8 billion at this point, right? Well, in Americans, I was just looking at this the other day. Yeah, what is it? We use about, I don't know, 5 times or something as much as, the typical, compared to the average of the rest of the world. Yes, we consume the most per capita, which is inefficiency. And really, if you want to dig down to the root of inefficiency and waste in our culture, it is what? You know the answers. Consumerism, materialism, planned obsolescence, right? So that kind of runs smack in the face against sustainability. Not kind of, it does. Actually, I've heard, I don't know if it was Noam Chomsky or somebody else, but yeah, capitalism it's like, what is it? The antithesis, or capitalism and sustainability, they're like oil and water. They just don't mix. Now you can use an emulsifier, some surfactant, you can use some surfactant and make a emulsification, but other than that, they don't really mix very well. So that's a part where, like, okay, hybrid and electric vehicles, again, are important, very important. I make my living working on them, so it would be in my interest for them to exist. And yet, though, I may be critical of them at certain times and in certain areas. And people may ask why. Jordan, there's already enough haters of electric vehicles. Why are you piling on if you say that you support them? Well, I support them, and I want them to succeed. So what I am doing is I am attempting to disarm, if you will, the critics. And what do I mean by that? Well, some of these issues I've talked about the resources that they use to make them, and, actually, when you look at the total lifetime of a certain vehicle, it may or may not have made a carbon negative difference. Okay, like there's several electric vehicles in prototypes, right? Projects, ones that never actually made it to production. That, yes, indeed, they used a tremendous amount more carbon than they ever ended up saving. And even ones that went into production because of things that I was talking about, if right after it got out of warranty and then something real basic happens, but then people couldn't get it fixed, so it just got scrapped, then in that case, yeah, maybe it did not pay off its carbon debt. Now, like with these Priuses and all these, most electric vehicles do. That's important to point out. But that's only if they drive a certain number of miles on a certain percent renewable energy. So, well, actually, you could actually be charging them from conventional non-renewable energy, and the net carbon savings will still end up being better with the electric vehicle, meaning a negative net carbon, even charging from coal. I mentioned that last night as well. But of course, you could charge them with solar, but that is not always the case. And you see, that was the way. Whenever anybody would criticize electric vehicles or renewable energy at all, like my just knee-jerk reaction, right, was to just kind of just swat it away, like yeah, you make an electric vehicle, but how are you going to charge it? How are you going to charge it, man? I'm just like, just build solar panels, bro. Done, right? Throw some solar panels on the roof. Done. Well, it's not that simple. I mean, it is kind of that simple, but in practice, it gets a little bit more complicated. Again, because of time and because of accidents, right? I mean, trees can fall on your solar panels, right? Destroy them. And if you just bought them a year ago and they hadn't paid back their carbon debt, well, then guess what? That is, sorry, not carbon negative. That's actually carbon positive. Now, it would be good if you, I don't know, some of the panels weren't broken, so don't throw all of them away, right? That's kind of, here's an analogy that I give for these vehicles. It's like this, all right? Say you got a flashlight, like a mag light, okay? And you got some rechargeable batteries in there, okay? And you're like, my flashlight, it's not working so good anymore. I'm going to pop out these old, worn out rechargeable batteries and save those and try to use them for something else. And I'm going to take this perfectly good, although maybe slightly used flashlight and throw it away. And then I'm going to say, I need a new flashlight with new batteries. Because as it turns out, those old batteries I tried saving, they don't actually work very good in a vehicle anymore. They work great in other applications, but maybe not in a vehicle anymore. So yeah, that's the current system, and that goes back to what I was saying with Second Life on electric vehicles, that most people and most articles and policymakers, they only talk about the battery for obvious reasons, but there's the motors, there's the motor controllers, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that it's not just fun or cool, but we can use that stuff specifically to build carbon negative applications like solar and micro hydro power systems, wind energy systems. So there was a lot of value in that. And if we simply just make better use of that, combined with what I was talking about with the fleets, then the net result of all of that is we make hybrid electric vehicle, I'm not going to say ownership, but give access to a working hybrid and electric vehicle to everybody, essentially. And I want people to do this all over the world, by the way. That's the goal of EVA. I'm not trying to open my own repair shops or my own dealerships all across the country. No, I'm simply doing the pilot programs myself, doing just that. I've already have a repair shop, and we're in the process of working with the dealership and getting a larger facility to be able to actually have this fleet that I'm speaking about and maintain it, and then that'll be our pilot program, right? To actually prove in practice that what I'm talking about can be done. And the cool thing is that if you guys are watching this now, you'll get to see that process. And also on this channel, not on this show specifically, but on this channel, I will have other segments to talk about. If you're interested in being an entrepreneur, if you want to get into this business, right? If you're thinking about a career change, if you're already an engineer and you're working for a place, but you want to do something different, or if you're a student, you don't know what to study yet, or if you're a mechanic and you're tired of doing oil changes, and you're looking for some opportunity, some way to better yourself, get some more training, and get a higher level of pay. Well, I'm going to share with you what I had to learn the hard way through blood, sweat, tears, and spending my own money every time I messed up, right, and failed. I had to fix it and make it right. So what I had to learn the hard way, you guys don't necessarily. And the reason why I'm okay with that, because you could essentially say I'm giving away things to my competition. Well, I'm probably not going to give everything away, obviously, but I am going to give away significant amount of what I know. And because a lot of what I know, I learned or got my start from certain internet forums like PriusChat.com and watching YouTube videos, right? So, that's part of me giving back to that. And I've already been making some videos for YouTube, for Voltec, for a little while now. But it's it's a way to give back, but also if I could prove this works, which I know it does, I'll just be arrogant and say that I know it does because I already do it in some capacity. So yeah, and there's no like, well, what about this? Or we need to wait on this shipment of this thing to come in, or we got to wait for this price to come down. No, there's nothing like that here. This is all these cars. They're already here. They're already sitting in people's backyards or junkyards or on their way to the junkyard, or sadly, as we speak, some of them are being destroyed. And there is a lot of good stuff left in there. And so if you think about those two things, though, right? I'm basically saying that we can, using what's already out there, okay, we can lower the price dramatically. Not just lower the price, but like cut the price in half or in a quarter. Or like I said, it's not even, don't even really think of it as a price. It's a subscription, right? You just monthly fee to have a vehicle. And if you don't have money, or you lost your job, or some situation happens and you don't need the vehicle, you can't afford it anymore, you could give it back and you're done, right? I mean, you're not locked into some years long lease. And the financing dealership stuff, I talked about that last night, and I was going to talk about that more today. But those places, some of those places, a lot of those places are taking advantage of people. And yeah, so it's important for me to mention that, though, because see, that's another thing that people don't normally consider. What's holding normal people back from leasing or driving a hybrid or an electric vehicle? The things people don't normally think of is the full coverage insurance that I mentioned, and the other part that I was just about to mention. I already said the service and repairs. It's getting late, but yeah, they that cost of ownership, and in people's minds, I guess. That's what co-hosts are for. But what I'm saying, though, is that I was talking about financing and why it's important. I started talking a little bit at the beginning of the video about risk pools. That, hey, EVA, we have a fleet of hybrid and electric vehicles that we're building. We make them available to people at a low cost, on a subscription basis, and with all service and repairs included. And yeah, people can get out of that if they need to, right? If they don't like the car, they can get out of it. If they wanted to switch, they said, hey, this Prius is great. I watched some of your videos and I see what you're talking about. As it turns out, I only drive 20 miles a day. So actually a Nissan Leaf is fine for me. And so I would like to switch to one of those, please. And we say, absolutely. We're so happy that you decided to do that. Because then all that fear of what about the battery? Who's going to fix it, right? Yeah, those are the two areas. Well, not two. These are the areas, right? Full coverage insurance. Who's going to fix it? Those are the parts that are holding most people back. And then just the availability because of that lease requirements. So, and we can't rely on some distant technology that's not here yet, or even if it's already here, but it's not here in numbers yet, then it's not going to do us a ton of good. But what we can do is we could take all these that are already out there and we can keep them on the road. And in the process of doing that, we will create millions of jobs, and we will save millions of tons of CO2 from going into the atmosphere and into the oceans. Also, we will create more jobs with the other stuff I was talking about. Oh, and the training, right? So it's another huge area that's just kind of, I don't know if it's omitted or just not thought of, but who okay, who are going to work and fix on these vehicles? If you guys aren't in the automotive repair industry, you probably don't know that it's actually very hard for most shops and most dealerships to keep good mechanics because the good ones are hard to find and they want a certain amount of money, and most dealerships don't really want to pay them that. So they do. A lot of them do now what's called flat rate, and that's a different discussion. But so it's hard. It's already really hard just to keep regular mechanics, all right, at a dealership. Now, how many mechanics are there in this country, in America, that are certified to work with high voltage and have experience doing that, while also understanding, the chemistry stuff with the batteries, just all the different safety considerations you got to take into mind. And how many of them know how to, program stuff and do coding and be able to reprogram autonomous vehicle sensors. These vehicles are, people think of like the mechanic before, with grease on them and the monkey wrench and, maybe not the smartest guy. Well, to work on these cars, you basically need to be somewhere in between a technician, engineer, and even past engineer. There's a lot of engineers that don't even know how to use a multimeter, so let alone fix one of these cars and turn a wrench, right? Because it's hard work and it's very complicated, some of it, and the amount of tools and equipment and know-how, experience to actually do this. Well, the number of those people in America, I would have to guess, is less than 1,000 at this point. Yes, probably that few. Maybe more, but not that many, right? And see, it's not too apparent of an issue just yet because there's not that many hybrid and electric vehicles just yet. But these issues I'm talking about will become more and more apparent as time goes on. And if you want to get more people driving hybrid and electric vehicles, then the first things you need to go after are the things that I've been talking about. Not just making them cheaper, making them faster, putting in more charging stations, right? Because that's basically about as far as the other plans go, right? Well, how do we get more on the road? Build more, build faster. More of them faster, they go further and more charging stations, and things will fall into place. That's just not true. And, well, it will fall into place, but it takes a long time, and there's an awful lot of fumbling and waste, right? In that, and we don't have time to waste, and we don't have resources to waste, right? We shouldn't be squandering resources on a certain project if it doesn't make sense. So that being the case, let's make the best use out of what we have. And since all this stuff is here, like I said, that means that if everybody said, you know what, we're going to do what Eva's talking about, like the automakers get on board with this, right? Different governments get on board with it. This is something that overnight you could start doing. And within just a period of 1 or 2 years, actually change the projections of these graphs, which is not an easy thing to do. And I talked about that last night. But yeah, it's going to require a ton of electric vehicles to change the graphs to look like that. And so yeah, if you want to get more people driving hybrid and electric, what you need to do is you need to bring the cost down for service and repairs. And you need to have an some sort of established system, guidelines, something, so that people are more educated about prices on this stuff and they can see what it costs to actually to have a new battery put in a Toyota Prius. Because the price is probably not as high as you think it is. Voltec, we've been doing a special now for a while. Toyota dropped the price $500 over a year ago. And so we dropped our price to make it the lowest that I've found in the country. And that's $2,200 out the door with a 2-year warranty and including installation. Now, I'm not trying to sell batteries here. Just FYI. That's really not the purpose of this. Now, but look, if you can, so most people might not know that. If you talk to most people, they think it's like $5,000 or $10,000 to have a new hybrid battery, which at a certain dealership with a new battery, it might be. But, again, though, that changes people's minds. There's a lot of people I've talked to, right, that when you tell them that, they pause for a minute and say, oh, okay. Well, then who does that? And I said, well, I do that. That's what I do. I'm a mobile hybrid electric vehicle mechanic. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that, right? So most people don't know that independent repair shops that specialize in hybrid electric vehicles, that they don't even know that we exist right now. And so if you're talking about mass adoption of electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, I mean, how can you expect that to happen when you don't even have like the basics, right? You got to crawl before you can run, and there's more to it than charging stations and longer ranges. And it has a lot to do with the preconceptions in people's minds that have been put there, right, by petrol companies, right, over all these years, telling you that, electric cars are bad, that they're, weak, that if you're a man, it makes you feminine to drive an electric. That's a real thing, by the way. That's studies have shown, men think that electric vehicles make you more feminine for some reason. And if it's anything to do with sustainability, is considered more feminine. So if that's the case, then I guess I'm a woman. No, but it's weird, right? And think about that, though. It's not a mistake that, it's really weird. Why would American men think it's cool to burn fuel? Now, granted, burning gasoline, actually burning stuff with gasoline in a controlled fashion, I'm not recommending you should do that. It's very dangerous. You'll probably blow yourself up. It can be spectacularly amazing, though. And no, I'm not a pyromaniac. Yes, I am. But I'm just saying, right? You can make a hell of a light show with gasoline. It's very dangerous, but it's okay. I could see something manly maybe to that, but burning it in a car is not necessarily that cool. And the idea that it's cool and manly and patriotic is confusing to me, to say the least. But once you think about it, well, it's not a coincidence, right? If you know about advertising, you know about psychology and how it's all these subconscious things. When you see an advertisement, before they've even said anything in the ad, they might have put several messages into your head without you being aware of it. There's some good books on that subject if you're interested in that type of stuff. But, in other words, people's brains have been programmed with information that they're not even aware it was programmed into there. They just kind of assumed it was their own thought, but it's not. Inception much? I mentioned, it's like a third night in a row I've mentioned that movie. I only watched it once. Unless I've watched it many times. But it's almost 2. It's Friday night anyways, people. Thanks for hanging out with me to talk about carbon emissions. All right. That's an exciting Friday night, if I do say so. All right. I said I wouldn't do all my character impressions on here, accents. But I don't want to offend anybody, okay? That's all. But it's all in good spirit. And, you know, a lot of times I work alone. So I talk to myself and, yeah, make up different voices. It's just something to pass the time when you're wrenching on battery packs all day. But alas, I am no longer doing all that by myself. So I moved on to better things. And like this, I'm going to teach you guys how to wrench on it so you guys can do that. I don't want to do it anymore. I've done enough, okay? I've done my part. Done my part. Now I do this part. Deal? Sounds good. All right. All right. What time is it? I would really like to have you guys not look at me and watch a video. But the problem is I'm still navigating, you know, all the stuff with YouTube and the rules and all that, right? For like embedding other people's videos, which I didn't realize, but yeah, that is indeed what I'm doing. But there's a lot of caveats to this stuff, and that is, well, I'm a news show of sorts, and if I'm talking about other news shows and showing a part of their segment to respond to that part of their segment, it seems reasonable to me that I could, you know, show that. But I don't know. In one of my other streams the other night, I put a live video in there, and or I put a video in there, tried to play it, and my stream crashed. So I don't know if that was why, but yeah, you know, there was so I watch all the other YouTubers that make things about electric vehicles. And that's what I was playing last night. And I'm fans of them. I may give them a hard time. These guys right here. Zach and Jesse. See? I know you guys. I actually watch your show. And yeah, they got some good stuff. And there was also this one. Are you guys still hearing me? I think so, right? I haven't done a mic check in a minute, so yeah. All right, let's go. I played this yesterday because I think it was a really good explanation. Okay, play the stupid ad then. Come on, just play it. Play it.
If you manage
it. So you guys don't hear it. See, they're advertising anyways.
Rush to do it? Why not just keep selling hybrids?
I hear you, and actually I didn't know that fact. That does make partial sense, but at the same time, you know, why not have one, right? I mean, it won't hurt anything to have one, to, if anything, to test out the market, to test out the technology, because I don't care how big of a manufacturer are, you know that even Volkswagen Group and other manufacturers have had trouble with their first electric car, because, you know, even though they're big and been around for a while, it's their first go at it. So why not do that? You know, try to become profitable just on a smaller scale and be able to do it. They certainly can hire talent, or already have talent. They have the money, they have the factories, you know, they have this deal with Panasonic now. Why not do that? Like, I'm not saying they should go electric tomorrow. I get the whole hybrid sales thing, but why not at least start trying? Do they not believe the future is electric? And by electric, I mean battery powered, not hydrogen fuel cell powered electric.
I think that they know that, Alex. And I think it just comes down to the fact that Toyota does not want to make a car that loses money. It's very simple. Electric cars are not profitable today. It's that simple. And I think that they are much more content making hybrids that make them a ton of money, selling a ton of them, and saying, you know what? When we need to, we can flip the light switch and do it. We're Toyota. We're huge. And you know what? They have a tremendous amount of experience, more than any other automaker, working with electrification, let's say. You know, it's not fully electric cars, but they've sold how many million hybrids? And it's, you know, it's giving them a lot of experience working with batteries, working with electric powertrains. It's not totally the same thing, but they've got the engineers, and I think that they can jump in the game when they need to. I'm not happy that they're not joining in now, and they're not say doing their part to bring pure electric driving to the public. But I understand it as a business decision. They have a
All right, let's go back to me. What Tom was saying there, I couldn't say better myself, because that's the reality, and that is that at this point in time, electric vehicles are not profitable for most automakers. Because Zach and Jesse, I'm sure, would be quick to point out and argue that Tesla is, or is at least on track to be one of the first companies that can actually say they are a profitable electric vehicle company. Now, why is that? Because of the extensive amount of research and development that's required. Excuse me. If you want to make a new gas-powered vehicle in 2020, it's not very hard, right? You have over 100 years of, at this point, free patents, declassified stuff. I mean, it's easy, right? Now, I'm saying it's easy. There's still a ton of work and testing and all that goes into that. But compared to making a new electric vehicle from scratch, right? And it's like, not only are you making this from scratch, you might actually have to grow some of the ingredients yourself. Like you might actually have to get some chickens for the eggs and etc. Right? So like build your own battery cells, like Tesla, like make your own factories, because there's not enough out there from the other companies. They didn't like the prices. They didn't like having somebody else hold something over their head. Right? They wanted to be in control. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not always the best way to do things. So what Tom is saying is true. And to a lot of people, EV activists, enthusiasts, that may hit a nerve with you to hear people say that. It may hit a nerve to hear people like me talk about the carbon price it took to manufacture it, the lifetime emissions, and it's like, well, why then am I talking about that, right? Well, like, why am I beating on electric vehicles? They already have enough haters as it is. And the answer is that if we don't talk about these problems, and if we don't find solutions, or at least discuss solutions and work towards those solutions, then guess what? Those opponents, the people that actually hate electric vehicles, you're giving them ammunition, essentially, live ammunition that will hurt us, because it's true. Some of it. Now, of course, they totally take it out of context and exaggerate and mislead people. But they wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have that opportunity in the first place. And I'm sorry, Tom. I'll go to a different frame here so you don't look. Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's just that's the fact of it. That it whatever I just said. I totally lost my thought. I've got so many things I'm thinking about. But yeah, this video was specifically asking, why doesn't Toyota make electric cars? And it's something I've asked for a long time. And I was talking about that. Yes. If we don't talk about these problems and figure out solutions and address it, or at least begin that process, then the actual opponents of EVs will do that. And it may actually have some weight to it, right? Even if it is exaggerated and misrepresented, it would be better than to just not even give them that opportunity in the first place, right? That's my thinking. But it's way more than just winning arguments with people. This has to do with actually getting something that they said there, which was, electric vehicles for everybody and or for all. And but these are the realities right now. And yeah, that my reaction before was, I don't want to hear that. You're focusing on the negative, right? You're just focusing on the negatives. There's lots of positives to this technology, and absolutely there is. But if you think about this like politics, right? Because there's politics involved at this point. So, and there's vested interests on all different sides of this, So you to cut through that stuff, it's okay. Why aren't they making these cars? Because of what Tom just said there, and if we address these things, I'm not choosing to focus on the negative, right? Because it's true. It is. I am focusing on the negative, I guess, right? Because why? That's the most important thing to start with, right? Like that's the challenge is, and there's plenty of other people at this point working on making better batteries, faster charging stations and better vehicles. There is not a lot of people working on what I am working on and what Eva's working on, which is this end of life kind of stuff. And yes, there's second life for batteries, and that's about it. So we're going far beyond that. And then the batteries, again, people kind of get caught up on that. The battery basically doesn't matter. What are you talking about? It doesn't matter without a vehicle or without solar panels and a power inverter, and it's something to use it with, right? Or it's just a battery. It doesn't do anything. So we got to look at this as the whole vehicle, not just the battery, and what happens to it after it's done. And it's simple business. What Toyota is doing, and also what he said there about them having literally the most number of miles of any automaker as far as electric powertrains and that the type of experience. So Toyota could make a heck of an electric car if they wanted to, but they're not. They're choosing to focus on hybrids. And what they talked about in this video definitely was probably the largest reason, which is just simple economics. It's a business, right? I mean, EVA's a nonprofit. It's a charity, so I don't have to make a profit. I can't make a profit. Doesn't mean I can't earn a salary, but I can't make a profit for shareholders. However, Toyota is a for-profit company, and they have to make profit for their shareholders. So, although that's changing, but again, different discussion there. But maybe Toyota, now here's where I'm hoping to talk with Toyota in the future and help. I want to help automakers, okay? I want to help them make better cars for you and for me and for all of us. And I don't mean faster, nicer looking cars. I'm talking about cars that will last longer. And then it's not even about just making them, because they can make these really great cars, but if you don't take care of them, right? And if there's not really a coherent plan for what happens after warranty, and if it's really expensive to fix it, then you're just kind of ensuring that people aren't going to buy it, right? So, we bring the cost. If EVA can help the automakers make better vehicles that last longer, and they're less expensive, because we're able to bring down their operating costs, their costs for research and development, and their costs for just all these other parts, okay? If we can save them money and make their processes more efficient, like I was saying earlier, that either means A, you can make the same amount of whatever you were trying to make before, hybrid or electric vehicles, or you could, or you could make more using the same amount of resources. So you could make the same amount using less, or you could make more using the same amount. I'm saying we make more using the same amount, because that gets us to the graphs that I had up faster, which gets us to other graphs which I didn't pull up, which show emissions going down faster, which hopefully means us not going down as a species faster. But that's a part of this video here may have missed, and that is the carbon savings. Is Toyota's impact better spent making, as Tom put it, tons of hybrid vehicles instead of a few electric vehicles in comparison? Oh, by the way, he said millions. By the end of this year, 2020, Toyota is on track to have sold 15 million, that's 15 million hybrid electric vehicles worldwide since they started selling them. So that's a lot. And a lot of those are still out there. And a lot of them can be saved, like what I'm talking about. And a lot of them, if you wanted to, you could actually change it into a plug-in hybrid. So yeah, that's part of what I'm proposing. And I don't have all the math yet to say. Now, maybe Toyota can. Again, I hope to talk with them eventually. And because maybe it's just a PR thing. Maybe that really is the case. Maybe Toyota has the data to show that, but for some reason, they just haven't got that message out there. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is just a business thing, right? That's very likely. So, hey, consider this. Maybe they're better off selling hybrids until a certain year, like 2020, right? Because they've been building all this profit. They got all this expertise and experience. So then when they say, okay, now we're doing electric, they'll have the money, the resources, everything there to do it. That's not a bad plan either, because it's not like they're just sitting by idly in the meantime saying, well, when it's convenient, we'll do something. No, they are doing something. They're making the most hybrids in the world, okay? They have sold the most number of hybrids out of any automaker by far. So, yeah, maybe that's their strategy, right? I mean, I kind of just thought about that. So they're doing something in the meantime, and also doing something that's profitable and allowing them to save up money and build up and get all the stuff figured out with the batteries and all that. And yeah, because if they wait till like 2025, think about. And by the way, that's also a timeline they were talking about for their solid state battery technology that they're working on. So maybe that's what it is, right? Maybe they're just saying, no. You guys just don't know, right? We're not telling you. We're not going to show you what we're doing and our top secret plans are behind the scenes. Maybe they know that they just need to wait a few more years and they will have a viable solid state battery. Maybe. That's a long shot. But if that's the case, then I could see why they would wait. So, I have talked for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I did that last night and the night before and the night before that. So, I'm going to sign off. And we'll keep working our way through this stuff bit by bit. And hopefully you learned something. This is just the very beginning of this channel. I encourage you to stick around, or at least just check back every month or so and watch us progress. The proof will be in the pudding, as we say, and you'll see. And yeah, hopefully we're successful, but I want your help. It's a team effort. Do it ourselves, people. And let's add another video source. No cameraman here tonight, so I'm going to put this up here. And, all right. Thank you for watching. This has been another broadcast of EVA Live with your host, Jordan Brandt. And thank you all for joining me. Have a fabulous evening or morning, whichever it is, wherever you are at on this beautiful planet of ours. With that said, aloha. Love you all. See ya.
Who's that? The mastermind. Who's that?